The morning mist hung low over the lake as I slid the small boat into the water. The air was crisp, the kind of fresh that hits your lungs sharply at first then settles in comfortably. I had been looking forward to this fishing trip all week. Just me, the lake, and the quiet. The cabin I was staying in was miles away from any other human, tucked deep in the woods, perfect isolation. As I rowed out to the center of the lake, the only sounds were the soft splash of the oars and the occasional chirp of a bird. Waking up, I had been to this lake once before years ago, but never alone. Today it was just me. I cast my line, letting the hook sink into the water, watching the small ripples spread out in every direction. For a while I just sat there soaking in the stillness. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Suddenly there was a tug on the line, strong, insistent. My heart raced, a little excitement bubbling up. I started to reel it in, expecting a decent-sized fish. But then something strange happened. The pull became stronger, much stronger than any fish I'd ever encountered. It yanked so hard that the rod bent nearly in half, and I had to stand up to steady myself. "What the hell?" I muttered under my breath, gripping the rod tightly. The thing on the other end of the line was pulling me, almost like it wanted to drag me into the water. I fought back, digging my feet into the bottom of the boat, but whatever it was, it wasn't letting go for what felt like hours, but was probably just a few minutes. I struggled against it. My arms burned from the effort, and sweat started to drip down my face. Just when I thought I was making some progress, the boat lurched forward toward the middle of the lake. I lost my balance and nearly toppled overboard. Panic set in. This wasn't a fish, no way. I tried to loosen the reel, to let whatever was down there have the line, but it didn't matter. The force was relentless, dragging me deeper into the lake. Far from the shore, my heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in quick, shallow bursts. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew I needed to cut the line fast. I reached for my knife, fumbling with it. As the boat jerked forward again, my hand shook, and I dropped the knife onto the floor of the boat. I cursed under my breath, crouching down to grab it, but before I could, there was a sharp snap. The line broke, sending me sprawling backward. For a moment, everything was quiet again. I lay there staring up at the pale sky, trying to catch my breath. I sat up slowly, looking out over the water. The surface was calm, as if nothing had happened, but I wasn't convinced. My hands trembled as I picked up the knife, my mind racing. What the hell was that? I scanned the water, expecting to see something, anything, but there was nothing out of the ordinary, just the dark, glassy surface of the lake. I should have left right then, rowed back to shore, and packed my bags, but I didn't. Instead, I decided to cast the line again. I had to know what was down there. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was stupidity, probably both. This time I was ready. I braced myself as I felt another touch, tug, softer this time, but steady. My pulse quickened as I began reeling it, an inch by inch. Whatever it was coming up. I could feel it, heavier than before, resisting less, but still pulling against me. As the line got closer to the surface, I leaned over the edge of the boat, trying to catch a glimpse of it. The water was dark, almost black in the early morning light, and for a moment I thought I saw something, just a shadow, maybe a large fish, something ordinary. Then the surface broke. It wasn't a fish. A pale, lifeless hand breached the water, gripping my line, fingers stiff and cold. I froze, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. Slowly an arm followed, then a shoulder. A human form, waterlogged and bloated, started to rise out of the lake. Its face, swollen and pale, stared blankly ahead, eyes wide open, mouth slightly agape. I stumbled backward, nearly falling overboard again, my heart slamming against my ribs. The figure floated half submerged, its dead eyes fixed on me. I let go of the rod, but it didn't matter. The thing just hovered there, bobbing slightly with the movement of the water. For what felt like eternity, I stood there, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to think. Then slowly the body began to sink again, slipping back beneath the surface. The pale hand, the last thing to disappear into the depths. I sat there in the boat, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. I wanted to leave to row back to shore and never look back, but my body wouldn't move. I just stared at the water, waiting, expecting it to come back up, but it didn't. After what felt like hours, I finally managed to start rowing. My hands shook the whole time, and every sound, every splash made my heart race. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I reached the shore. I packed up my gear as fast as I could and drove away, leaving the cabin and the lake far behind. I didn't tell anyone about what happened. Who would believe me? It was easier to just forget, to pretend it had all been some kind of nightmare, but I still see that hand sometimes in the dead of night reaching out from the water, and I know deep down that whatever I pulled up that day is still down there waiting. I had always loved the peacefulness of fishing, the quiet lapping of water against the boat, the birds flying overhead, the scent of the lake in the early morning air. It was my escape. So when I took a solo trip to the old lake cabin, I expected nothing but a few days of calm and catching bass. The cabin sat on the edge of Lake Crescent, tucked away deep in the woods. The locals didn't come here much anymore, saying the lake had changed, something about the water feeling colder, darker, but I didn't believe in local myth. To me, it was just another quiet lake, the perfect spot to disconnect. That first day I settled and unpacked my gear and rode out on my little aluminum boat. Just before sunset, the lake was eerily still, a mirror reflecting the darkening sky. As I cast my line, the only sound was the soft whir of the reel. I sat back, letting the calm wash over me. Minutes passed, then an hour, no bites. Not even a tug. The water below seemed deep. Then I remembered, almost as if it had a bottomless quality to it. Now the sun dipped lower, casting an orange glow on the horizon, and that's when I felt it, a sharp tug on the line, harder than anything I'd felt before. I jerked the rod back, excited. This had to be a big one, but the thing on the other end wasn't acting like a fish. It pulled with such force that I nearly lost my grip. My heart raced. Whatever was down there was huge, too huge for this lake. I tried reeling it in, but it didn't budge. Instead, it seemed to pull me closer to the center of the lake, the boat scraping along the surface of the water like a toy. Sweat dripped down my face as I wrestled with the rod. The line grew tighter, creaking like it was about to snap. Then suddenly the tension vanished and the boat rocked violently. I almost fell overboard. I peered into the dark water, trying to see what had happened. The lake was calm again, too calm. Something wasn't right. As I sat there trying to catch my breath, I noticed something, a ripple moving toward the boat. It wasn't fast, but it was steady, like something was swimming just below the surface. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed the oars and started rowing back toward the cabin. The ripple followed. At first I thought it might just be the wake from my boat, but it stayed too far behind, moving in a way that felt deliberate, like it was tracking me. I rowed harder, my muscles burning with each stroke. The ripple kept coming closer. Now I could see the water parting, something dark beneath it, something big. Panic set in. I wasn't going fast enough. I rowed with everything I had, the boat inching toward the shore, but the thing beneath the surface was faster. I could feel its presence now, a coldness that seemed to radiate from the water itself. I dared a glance back, and that's when I saw it, a shadow, massive and shapeless, gliding just below the surface. My mind raced. What the hell was that? It couldn't be a fish. It was too big, too unnatural. My thoughts were interrupted by a loud thud against the bottom of the boat. The entire thing lurched, nearly flipping over. I scrambled to keep my balance, the oars slipping from my hands. I looked into the water again. The shadow was right beneath me, circling the boat. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't some ordinary creature. There was something wrong with this lake. Suddenly the boat was hit again, harder this time, and I was thrown to the side. I clung to the edge, my heart hammering in my chest. The ripple disappeared, and for a brief, terrifying moment, everything went silent. Then, without warning, a hand, pale, slimy, and unnatural, reached up from the water and gripped the side of the boat. I froze, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. Another hand appeared, followed by an arm, and then a head. It wasn't human, at least not anymore. Its eyes were black, empty voids, and its skin was slick, and model like something that had been submerged for too long. It stared at me unblinking as if it were studying me, deciding what to do next. I reached for my paddle, swinging it wildly at the thing, trying to knock it away, but it didn't flinch. It just kept staring, its grip tightening on the boat. I could hear the wood creaking under its hands. In a blind panic, I grabbed the knife from my tackle box and stabbed at the hand gripping the boat. The blade sunk into its flesh, but it didn't bleed. Instead, it let out a low guttural sound, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It released the boat and slid back into the water, without a splash, disappearing into the depths as quickly as it had come. I sat there breathless, shaking, waiting for it to return, but the lake was still, again too still. I rowed back to shore as fast as I could, my eyes darting around, waiting for the ripple to reappear, but nothing followed me this time. When I reached the dock, I jumped out of the boat, not even bothering to tie it up, and ran for the cabin. I slammed the door behind me, locking it tight. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every creak of the cabin sent my heart racing. I couldn't stop thinking about the creature in the lake, the way it had looked at me as if it knew something I didn't. The next morning, I packed up my things and left. I didn't care that I had only been there one night. Whatever was in that lake wasn't natural, and I wasn't sticking around to find out what it wanted. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The lake was barely visible through the trees, but in the distance, I could have sworn I saw a ripple on the water surface moving slowly toward the shore.